A couple in their late 50s walks out of the grocery store, pushes the cart across the parking lot, loads a few bags into the trunk, and then pauses before getting into the car. Nothing unusual went into the cart. No expensive steaks, no pile of luxury items, just the kind of food most households would call normal. But the receipt is still higher than expected. Again. And that moment matters, because it captures something millions of people have been feeling but struggling to explain. It is not just groceries. It is not just one bad month. It is not a lack of discipline. And it is not proof that people suddenly forgot how to manage money. The financial environment changed. Pressure now comes from almost every direction at once. Food costs more, insurance costs more, property taxes rise, utilities creep up, phone bills stay high, streaming services multiply, medical costs never seem to settle, car repairs feel bigger, housing takes more, fuel still stings. And even households that did the responsible things, worked steadily, paid off debt, contributed to retirement, and avoided reckless spending, can still feel like the ground shifted under them. That is why so many people with decent incomes no longer feel secure. Life became financially heavier almost everywhere at once. And once you see the pattern, a lot of this starts to make more sense. More importantly, it becomes easier to protect your money and keep more control over it. For a long time, many Americans lived with a simple expectation. If you worked hard, stayed responsible, paid your bills, and did not get careless, you would be okay. Not rich, maybe not completely relaxed, but okay. There would be enough. Enough to cover the house, the groceries, the insurance, the car, the occasional repair, and maybe a little left for a trip, a gift, or a quiet emergency fund. That feeling of enough has been disappearing. And part of what makes this so unsettling is that people often cannot point to one dramatic collapse. It is more subtle than that. The checking account drains faster. The credit card gets used for things that used to fit comfortably inside normal cash flow. A home repair feels bigger than it should. A dental bill lingers longer. One appliance replacement can throw off the whole month. The margin is thinner, and thin margins make ordinary life feel unstable. That is the first shift to understand. Financial insecurity today does not always mean disaster. Very often it means reduced breathing room. It means there is less distance between normal life and financial stress. A problem that used to feel manageable now feels disruptive. And when that happens often enough, people start questioning themselves. They wonder if they missed something, if they should be handling this better. But in many cases, what changed was not character. What changed was the cost structure of daily life. The control shift here is simple but powerful. Instead of judging your finances only by income, start watching margin. How much room is left after the fixed and semi-fixed costs land? That number tells the truth faster than income alone. Two households can earn the same amount, but the one with less margin will feel far less secure. Once you start looking at pressure through that lens, the stress feels less mysterious. And one of the biggest reasons that margin disappeared did not arrive with a dramatic warning. It slipped in quietly, one monthly charge at a time. The subscription economy did not just grow, it took over the edges of normal life. Years ago, many household bills were obvious. Mortgage or rent, electricity, water, insurance, phone, maybe cable. Today, monthly life has been fragmented into dozens of recurring charges, many of them small enough to avoid immediate attention and regular enough to become invisible. Streaming services, cloud storage, premium phone features, device protection, delivery memberships, software renewals, password managers, security systems, internet add-ons, music plans, news access, app upgrades. Even some cars now come with features that nudge owners toward subscriptions for navigation, connectivity, or convenience functions that used to feel included. None of these charges looks catastrophic on its own. That is exactly why they work. $10 here, $15 there, another $9.99, another annual renewal converted into monthly form. Individually, they feel manageable. Together, they can quietly recreate a second utility bill, sometimes more. And then subscription inflation adds another layer. A service that started at one price gradually increases. Not enough to trigger outrage, just enough to keep drifting upward. Because the charge is automated, many people notice only after several increases have already happened. What makes this category so powerful is psychological. Recurring charges remove the pain of active spending. You do not feel the purchase each time. You feel the total later, when your account balance looks lower than it should. The control shift is not to cut everything and live smaller. It is to separate true utility from silent drift. Which services protect convenience you genuinely use? Which ones are just lingering because cancellation takes effort? A household does not need to eliminate every recurring charge, but it does need to know which ones are protecting quality of life and which ones are simply feeding monthly leakage. Because once recurring charges become normal, another category hits even harder, especially for older households. The category people cannot casually opt out of. Insurance has become a hidden tax on stability. Car insurance rises even for drivers with clean records. Home insurance climbs because of regional risk, rebuilding costs, weather events, and broader industry repricing. Health insurance premiums remain heavy. Deductibles stay high. Copays add up. Prescription costs can shift without warning. And for many people over 50, the deeper stress is not just the bill itself. It is the feeling of being trapped inside a system where the cost keeps rising, but the ability to walk away is limited. That is what makes insurance different from a restaurant meal, a vacation, or a streaming app. You can skip those. You cannot responsibly skip health coverage. You cannot usually ignore auto insurance. You cannot gamble with homeowners coverage if your house is your main asset. So even when people are trying to protect their money, insurance absorbs more of it before life even begins. And the emotional pressure here runs deeper than in most categories. Many older Americans are not thinking only about next month's payment. They are thinking about what one accident, one diagnosis, one storm, or one hospital stay could do to years of careful effort. That fear changes behavior. It makes people more cautious, more hesitant, and sometimes more exhausted than the bill alone would suggest. The control shift is not panic. It is review. Compare policies before renewal. Recheck deductibles. Ask what coverage changed. Review prescription options. Question automatic add-ons. Look for the difference between true protection and padded billing. You may not be able to escape the category, but you can reduce the odds of overpaying for complexity you did not choose. And nowhere is this feeling of complexity more familiar than the place people visit every single week. The grocery store did not just become more expensive, it became psychological. What used to be a routine errand now often feels like a running negotiation. Not because shoppers became irrational, but because stores became harder to read. Packages are smaller, prices move more often, promotions rotate constantly. Unit pricing matters more than ever. Store brands have become less of an occasional backup and more of a survival tool, and the shopper is doing more mental work in every aisle. This is where decision fatigue really shows up. You are not just asking, "Do I want this?" You are asking, "Is this package smaller than last month? Is that sale real? Is the family size still a value? Will this spoil before we use it? Is the cheaper option actually cheaper per ounce? Should I buy two now or wait? Did this used to cost less and I just forgot?" That mental load is part of the cost. And then there is portion shrinkage and presentation design. A bag looks similar but holds less. A container keeps the same shape but loses volume. A sale sign creates urgency, but the discount sits on top of a higher starting price. A familiar product gets reformulated, resized, or repackaged in ways that make comparison harder. So people leave the store not just spending more, but feeling tired. The control shift here is pattern recognition. Build a short list of dependable items, not just familiar brands. Focus on products with stable use, low waste, and clear value per serving. Treat rotating sales as optional opportunities, not instructions. And when a product becomes too confusing to justify, let it go without guilt. The goal is not to win every aisle. It is to reduce how often the store successfully pushes you into overthinking or overspending. And if you have noticed that normal shopping now requires constant calculation, that is worth pausing on for a second. Have you noticed how ordinary life now asks you to run small financial calculations all day long? At the store, at the pharmacy, in your email inbox, on your insurance renewal, on your phone bill, in the waiting room, at the mechanic. It is the same pattern repeating in different forms. Small decisions, constant trade-offs, tiny leaks, quiet pressure. If that has been wearing you down, that does not mean you are bad with money. It means you are trying to manage a system that demands more attention than it used to. And the fact that you still care enough to notice it is not weakness. It is awareness. And that awareness is what protects control. Nowhere does that need for control feel more personal than retirement. Retirement no longer feels safe in the way many people expected it would. This is one of the deepest emotional shifts in the country right now. For decades, retirement represented a phase where the financial heavy lifting was supposed to ease. Maybe income dropped somewhat, but so did certain costs. The mortgage might be smaller or gone. Work expenses disappeared. There was a sense that careful planning would create stability. But inflation changed the emotional meaning of fixed income. A retiree can have Social Security, a pension, retirement savings, maybe even a paid-off home, and still feel uneasy. Not because they are currently broke, but because they can see the math changing in front of them. Healthcare costs may rise faster than expected. Insurance can keep climbing. Home maintenance does not stop. Property taxes do not freeze simply because someone stopped working. Food and utilities keep moving. That is why so many older Americans are not saying, "I have nothing." They are saying, "I am afraid of what happens if this keeps going." And that fear is reshaping behavior. Some retirees return to work part-time, not always because they are in immediate crisis, but because they want another layer of protection. Others delay retirement longer than they planned. Some reduce travel, postpone helping family, or avoid larger purchases they once assumed would be manageable. The hidden pain here is that retirement insecurity does not only affect numbers, it affects peace. It changes whether people feel free to enjoy the years they spent decades preparing for. The control shift is to think in flexibility, not perfection. Protect cash flow where possible. Reduce recurring obligations before they grow. Plan for healthcare volatility rather than assuming averages will hold. And treat retirement as an environment to manage, not a finish line that automatically stays secure forever. That shift sounds small, but emotionally it matters. It moves a person from waiting to be surprised towards staying prepared. And once retirement starts to feel less certain, the effects spill into everyday choices, even for people who are still working. This is how quiet financial stress becomes the new normal. It does not always arrive as a dramatic emergency. Sometimes it looks like a series of modest decisions that slowly make life smaller. Fewer restaurant meals, less travel, delayed home projects, more repairs instead of replacements. Keeping the older car longer. Saying no to gatherings that involve spending. Buying fewer gifts. Pulling back from hobbies. Waiting one more month. Then another. Individually, these choices can sound reasonable. In many cases, they are reasonable. The issue is what they reveal when they happen across millions of households at once. People are not just being practical. They are quietly shrinking the edges of life to protect themselves from volatility. And this often happens without announcement. No one posts that they decided not to visit family because the hotel, fuel, and meals no longer feel easy. No one makes a speech about putting off replacing furniture for the third year in a row. No one celebrates avoiding a social event because it would tip the month in the wrong direction. That is why this trend can be hard to see from the outside. Many households still look fine. They are functioning. Bills are being paid. The lawn is cut. The car starts. Work continues. But the internal calculation has changed. More energy goes into preventing setbacks. Less goes into enjoying what money was supposed to make possible. The control shift here is to notice the difference between intentional reduction and fear-based shrinking. One protects your money. The other slowly erodes quality of life without a clear plan. If something matters deeply, it may deserve a protected place in the budget even during tighter periods. Control is not only about cutting, it is also about deciding what should remain untouched. Because when life starts requiring this many calculations, the emotional cost becomes impossible to ignore. This is why the whole experience feels so exhausting. Financial pressure is not only a math problem, it is a mental bandwidth problem. Every unresolved bill, every rising premium, every unclear grocery price, every renewal notice, every medical estimate, every repair decision asks for attention. And attention is finite. That is why even households that are technically managing can still feel worn down. They are carrying constant low-grade stress. Not panic, not collapse, just ongoing vigilance. The kind that follows you into the store, into the kitchen, into the mailbox, into the car, into bed at night when your mind starts quietly reviewing what is due next. Older Americans feel this especially strongly because they remember when ordinary life demanded less interpretation. A grocery trip was simpler. Insurance was painful, but less volatile. Fewer charges were hidden in subscriptions. Medical costs were still stressful, but the surrounding system felt less fragmented. It was easier to estimate what normal life might cost. That predictability had value. What many people miss is not only lower prices, it is lower complexity. It is the ability to move through a week without evaluating every category so closely. When predictability disappears, even a decent income feels less comforting because the future becomes harder to model. And that uncertainty drains confidence. People start hesitating. They delay decisions. They second-guess purchases. They feel guilty spending on enjoyment because some future cost might appear. Over time, that turns money from a tool into a source of constant background tension. The control shift is to reduce decision load wherever possible. Fewer unnecessary subscriptions. A tighter list of reliable grocery staples. Scheduled bill reviews instead of constant worry. A cushion, even a modest one, reserved for interruptions. Systems do not remove pressure completely, but they do reduce the number of surprises competing for your attention. And fewer surprises means more calm. When you step back, the pattern becomes clear. This is not one problem. It is a layered system of pressure. Groceries became harder to read. Subscriptions turned convenience into ongoing extraction. Insurance became more expensive and less avoidable. Retirement lost some of its emotional safety. Daily life demanded more calculation, and the result is not always visible crisis. Very often, it is something quieter, a steady erosion of breathing room, a background feeling that normal life now requires more effort, more attention, and more caution than it used to. That is why so many people with solid work histories and decent incomes still feel unsettled. They are not imagining it. They are responding to a real shift in how money leaves the household. And once you recognize that, the self-blame starts to lose its grip. The goal is not to control the entire economy. No household can do that. The goal is to become harder to confuse, harder to drain through small recurring leaks, harder to pressure through fake urgency, unclear pricing, and automatic increases, harder to push into passive spending. That kind of awareness matters now because the environment rewards inattention. It profits when people are too tired to review the bill, too rushed to compare the unit price, too overwhelmed to question the renewal, too discouraged to adapt. Calm awareness is how you push back. So if normal life has felt heavier lately, that feeling makes sense. The weight did not come from one mistake, it came from many categories rising, splitting, and stacking at the same time. But clarity changes the experience. When you can name the pattern, you can respond to it. You can protect flexibility. You can reduce waste. You can make fewer automatic decisions and more intentional ones. And even in a more expensive world, that creates something people need now more than ever: a steadier sense of control. If this helped you understand why normal life suddenly feels heavier than it used to, consider subscribing.